Say Christ is Lord. Say Christ is Lord. Say it.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Unpopular Opinion, and guys, today I am going to be revising and updating my review on Gettysburg, the movie Gettysburg from 1993.
You can't do that. You'd be the perfect target.
So years ago, the fourth movie review I ever did on this channel was Gettysburg is a bad movie. I saw it and I hated it, and I was really harsh and really critical of the film. Looking back, I didn't really do a great job with the sound quality, my arguments, or even the visual quality of the video is bad, and I kind of just want to come back and update it. So a little backstory about me: I'm a massive Civil War geek, super into history. I used to be a Civil War reenactor. I actually think it's kind of an interesting fun fact I'd love to share with you guys. I'm related to someone who fought at Gettysburg. One of my ancestors fought at Gettysburg. His name was Jason Goose. He was in the 31st Georgia, Company K. And so I find that interesting because I'm really passionate about the Battle of Gettysburg. I've studied it. I have all these books on Gettysburg. I go to the battlefield regularly, and I just think it's interesting. Not only is it awesome U.S. history, but it's also family history because one of my ancestors fought at Gettysburg.
Some were blue, some were gray.
So I just thought that'd be cool to share with you. First time I saw the movie, it was because the guys in my regiment told me it's one of the great Civil War films. It's one of the great movies. And I was in that movie, because a lot of the extras, maybe not a lot, most of the extras in that movie were actual reenactors, and I knew some people who were in that movie. I saw it and I was beyond disappointed. And then I took out my anger of being disappointed and then put it in a video. I rewatched the movie recently and I've changed my mind slightly. So my overall opinion on the movie is I don't think it's a good movie. I still think it's a bad movie, but it has things that are going for it that make it better than I previously gave it credit for. But here's the thing. I know a lot of people, a lot of Civil War buffs, a lot of history buffs, and Civil War reenactors are going to be mad at me because there are things about this movie that deserve criticism. There are things about this movie that I don't like and that I'm going to be critical on. So I don't say this to be disrespectful, and if you like the movie, I'm glad you do. I'm really glad you like this movie because I think one thing that this movie can do is potentially spark interest and cultivate people's curiosity about the Civil War. But at the end of the day, there are things that rightfully can be criticized about this movie. So the point of this video is basically I'm going to be explaining my new updated opinion. My new updated opinion is it's not a terrible movie. It's not good. It's not great. I don't think it deserves to be in the hall of the greatest Civil War movies, but there are things that it does good. So I'm going to be critical of it, but I'm also going to praise certain things. But ultimately, I'd say the movie's like a 4 out of 10 on a good day. But before we get into the video itself, guys, we are going to be playing a game. At the end of this video, I will be playing a quick 5-second clip from a random movie. If you were the first to correctly identify it and type the full title, I'm very strict on that, the full title of the movie in the comments below. If you're the first person to do that, I will pin that comment to the top of the comments and give you a shout out in the next video. So all you gotta do is stick around to the end of the video, watch that 5-second clip, type out the full title, and you win. So let's get into this. So I think a huge reason why I was really critical of it the first time I saw it is I didn't know that Gettysburg was actually a made-for-TV miniseries that got a theatrical release. So when I watched it, and it was 4.5 hours, that really threw me off. That's a really long movie. It's probably the longest movie I've ever seen. But it didn't feel like I was watching a movie. It felt really sterile and not cinematic. And then I came to realize years after the fact and years after I did my movie review that it was a made-for-TV miniseries, which that kind of makes me rethink a little bit. But I still, as a theatrical film, would have been disappointed either way in the theaters. I know full well a lot of people are going to say, well, you've included Gettysburg, clips of Gettysburg in a lot of your recent videos. And a lot of people who watch my Civil War shorts will note that I use the theme of Gettysburg's main title in my videos, which is true. So we're going to start out with the good things that this movie did. Firstly, I think the opening title sequence was magical. There's no other way to describe it. I really loved it. The music was awe-inspiring. It was inspirational. And I thought it was really cool seeing those photographs of of the real life historical figures and then the actors who played them side by side. That was really, really cool. I also think this is one of the most historically accurate movies I have ever seen. It's a very historically accurate movie. Honestly, I think the only major inaccuracy that I can think of that's worth mentioning is the fact that Joshua Chamberlain was not at Cemetery Ridge for the artillery barrage prior to Pickett's charge. So he wasn't at Pickett's charge. Other than that, I can't think of anything worth mentioning that's like a major inaccuracy.
I'm told you're descended from an illustrious military family. Your uncle who defended Fort McHenry during the War of 1812.
Please get down. We cannot spare you.
There are times when a Corps commander's life does not count.
So a lot of the strategy we see in Gettysburg, the weapons, the uniforms, the aesthetics, that was all spot on.
Federal fire compelled us to remove the artillery train farther to the rear, sir.
Not only that, the movie accurately depicts major episodes of the battles, like selects things that it chooses to portray, and it portrays it historically accurate. So one such thing would be General John Buford. He was in the cavalry. He was a federal cavalry officer, and he recognized the strategic importance of the ground around Gettysburg, and he knew if the Confederates were to engage them here, the high ground on the outskirts of town were crucial to whoever held it.
Block that road till the main body gets here. Deprive the enemy of the high ground.
And his delaying action, and then them falling back through Gettysburg on the first day, and then them occupying the heights to create their defensive position, and then the Union commander saying, this is really good ground for us to defend. Spot on.
We're gonna hold here in the morning. We hang on to the high ground and we have a good chance to win this fight that's coming.
Another thing I would say, the infamous take that hill if practical.
Major Taylor? Yes, sir. I want you to deliver this message in person.
That's true. That actually happened.
Find General Ewell. Tell him the federal troops are withdrawn in confusion.
People, every Gettysburg Civil War buff will always bring this up. July 1st, the Union troops, the line was faltering and the Confederates were advancing through the town.
Find General Hill's chief of artillery. Yes, sir. Tell him I want fire placed on that hill, as much fire as possible.
And the Confederates had won the day, and Robert E. Lee, the commander of the Army of Northern Virginia, he said his order to General Ewell was to take that hill if practical.
Tell him to take that hill if practicable. The one beyond the town.
Yes, sir.
Which, that being really ambiguous, not fully clear, major controversial thing that happened. Because Robert E. Lee was a Southern gentleman. There's this whole thing, Robert E. Lee, if you're a Southern gentleman, you don't give direct orders. You say things in a way that's like polite, but read between the lines, this is what I want you to do. Stonewall Jackson, who died prior to Gettysburg, would have known take that hill, but General Ewell, being new to command, he didn't take it that way. He took it as take that hill if practical, and he's like, well, it's not really practical. My men have been fighting all day. They're tired. It seems like an unnecessary risk. I'm not going to take it, which was a mistake. Robert E. Lee and the Army of Virginia paid dearly for that.
We could have taken that hill. God in his wisdom knows we should have taken it.
So capturing Cemetery Hill and Culp's Hill on the first day would actually have been a game changer. Or at the very least, the battle would have looked a lot different had the Confederates captured it, and they didn't. And a lot of people say that if practical thing, which we do see in the movie, was a huge blunder on Lee's part. Another thing that I really, really, really loved about the movie would be the behind the lines battle strategy and the commanders talking about their next move and them planning. That was awesome. Like the dialogue between the generals and the strategy behind the lines was magnificent to see.
That'll be Ewell's Corps. They're trying to flank us.
I love the scene where Buford's on the top of that building looking through his glasses and observing the battlefield and then saying, oh, they're trying to flank us. Or you've got, which was historically accurate as well, James Longstreet and General Lee disagreeing because General Robert E. Lee, coming off a string of recent victories,
And I have never yet left the enemy in command of the field. No, sir.
wanted to stay at Gettysburg and continue the fight and engage the enemy while they were there.
But the enemy is here.
While James Longstreet didn't think that was a good idea. And he said that if the army disengaged, being that we are so close to threatening Washington and we're on enemy territory, they have to pursue us. We don't have to fight them. They have to fight us.
How can I ask this army to retreat in the face of what they have done this day?
Not retreat, sir. Redeploy.
So if we leave, find good defendable ground, we can inflict a lot of casualties on them from a defensive position, and that will be the best course of action.
He wants us to attack him. We push back 2 corps, but there are 5 more coming.
But Robert E. Lee thought, no, the enemy's here. I'm going to fight them while they're here.
If need is there tomorrow, I cannot move this army away. No, sir, I will attack.
Just like we did at Chancellorsville.
And Richmond has nothing left to send us, so if we stay, we fight. Retreat is no longer an option.
That was seen in the movie. Now, I really, really love the portrayal of Robert E. Lee from Martin Sheen. I said this in my last video. Martin Sheen was fantastic as Robert E. Lee.
The attack will be preceded by massed artillery. A foot on fire, as Napoleon would call it.
Robert E. Lee is one of my personal heroes. I think he's one of the most admirable people. And in my opinion, I think he's one of the greatest generals in American history. I mean, that view's actually been challenged recently. A lot of people have come out and debated that, which is fine. I actually think that's pretty cool. I welcome historical debates from a professional, respectful sort of way, where a lot of people have rightly pointed out that Gettysburg was a massive mistake and Robert E. Lee was not thinking clearly. That's not something a strategic mastermind would have done, which is a fair assessment because he won the first day at Gettysburg, but the second day, after not taking the hills, not taking the high ground, and then repeat assaults on the Union left and the Union right, draining his force, losing a lot of men, a genius would have recognized it's a bad idea, we should disengage. And then his attack on the Union center at Cemetery Ridge, Pickett's charge was a massive mistake, and much like how we see in the movie, Longstreet disagreed, and he was very vehemently like, this is a bad idea, don't do it, do something else, I advise against it, and Robert E. Lee disregarded it.
I must tell you now, I believe this attack will fail. No 15,000 men ever made can take that ridge.
That scene in the movie, a fair critic would say a genius, a military genius wouldn't do that. So even though I think Robert E. Lee is one of the greatest generals in American history, it is undeniable his strategy at Gettysburg was really a mistake.
It's a distance of more than a mile over open ground, under fire of Yankee artillery from all over the field.
I also loved Tom Berenger as James Longstreet. In my opinion, that was probably his best performance out of any movie he's ever been in.
We whooped you British twice, as I recollect.
And that's a bold statement because I love Platoon. Platoon is number 3 on my top 5 favorite movies. So I don't say that lightly. Him as Longstreet was amazing. He looked like Longstreet too. And I really, really loved every scene he was in. I loved the scene where he's giving orders and he's commanding his subordinates.
I could get a battery up there.
You have to cut down trees to place your artillery. It'd be dark before you were in action.
And like I said, him disagreeing with Lee was fantastic.
We shall become allies.
Your government never ally itself with a confederacy that had the institution of slavery.
Also, Jeff Daniels as Colonel Joshua Chamberlain, that was incredible.
God go with you.
Because Jeff Daniels is like a doppelganger of Chamberlain. He looks like him, his performance was inspiring, and it was really good, so I loved that.
Will you put in a kind word for me?
Yes, sir.
So, like I said, the historical accuracy of Gettysburg, really, really spot on. The aesthetics, the uniforms, the weapons, that's spot on. The top 3 performances are the top 3 leading actors. Martin Sheen, Tom Berenger, Jeff Daniels, all amazing. The behind-the-lines battle strategy was great. The opening with the opening inspiring music was awesome. Those are the things that the movie did really, really good. I also love the sound quality of the movie. The weapons, the cannons, the clanking of the swords, and all that stuff. The sound quality of the film was great. So those are the things that I liked about Gettysburg, but now I'm going to get to the part where a lot of Civil War buffs and a lot of Civil War reenactors and history guys are going to be mad at me because now I'm going to be critical of the film because there's a lot of things I really don't like about this movie. I think my chief criticism about the movie is how it portrays the Civil War as a bloodless affair. What I mean by that is you watch the battle scenes, there is no blood, there is no gore. I'm not a psychopath. I don't like seeing people get hurt, but the Civil War, in terms of a American casualties is the worst war America's ever fought. And the Battle of Gettysburg is the bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil. I mean, in 3 days, we had 23,000 Union casualties, and then we have up to 28,000 Confederate casualties. The Vietnam War, there was up to, I think, 60,000 US dead over the span of years. Imagine something close to that in casualties in 3 days. And we don't see any blood in this movie for the most part. Like, yes, there is some exceptions where there's a little bit of blood on a guy's uniform or like a spring, whatever. We don't see any of that. As I said before in my previous review, I brought this up to a friend one time, and he said that the filmmakers made the conscious choice to tone down the violence of the movie so there could be a wider appeal for more audiences for this film to be exposed to, because not everyone likes blood. Most people don't like to see that sort of thing. And I don't agree with that. Well, for one, I will say, being that this was a made-for-TV movie, the code on what you're allowed to portray on TV versus cinema is completely different. So I'm pretty sure that the filmmakers were like, well, this can't be that violent because this is going to be a TV thing. There are rules. Whereas in a movie, if you were to portray a movie, you could actually show a lot more violence. And a lot of people previously commented in my video before saying that there's no blood in this film because this came from a time where special effects and makeup and stuff like that to portray these sort of injuries was not as it is today. But I don't agree with that, because if you look at Apocalypse Now, that's a gory movie where you actually see blood and guts. That came way before Gettysburg. Or you have Braveheart, came around at the same time. A lot of blood, a lot of gore. Glory, another Civil War movie, best Civil War film from the 80s, portrayed the Civil War gritty with a lot of injuries. Gettysburg doesn't do that. So I always say, if you're going to portray the bloodiest battle ever fought on American soil, you should do the justice of making it as realistic as possible. You see the battle scenes, like you see soldiers firing with their rifles and people just falling over, or you see cannons being fired and there's a plume of smoke or like an explosion and people just toppling over with nothing. And that just looks really bad. Cannons cause devastating injuries. Cannons cause really, really ghastly wounds that could rip people to pieces, and you don't see any of that in this movie. Like, you see that in The Patriot, the Mel Gibson thing, or the rifled muskets. Like, a Manet ball can tear tissue apart. The Civil War weapons were really brutal, and we don't see that in this movie, so it doesn't look realistic at all. I just think if you want to portray it, you got to put more effort into it, and that's why I was really, really disappointed, because I don't like when movies portray the Civil War as a bloodless affair. Now, this is relevant to what I'm about to say. The battles in this movie really didn't do it for me. I didn't like the combat. I didn't think it felt like a cinematic battle experience. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't gripping. It wasn't epic. It looked like someone videotaped a reenactment. And I think that's a very fair criticism. One, because I know what it's like. I've been to reenactments. I've been a part of them. I'm fully aware that reenactors were used for the extras. So probably the filmmakers were like, well, we can't show blood because Civil War uniforms are expensive. I know that firsthand. This was really expensive. So if we put blood on your uniform, you're ruining it. A lot of extras were not paid. They did this for free. They brought their own equipment for free to save a lot of production costs, and that would have been expensive. So that I understand and I get. Still not giving it an excuse. I understand, but I don't give that a pass. So that's probably why there wasn't enough blood in the movie, because reenactors brought their own equipment and they weren't going to be compensated for the special effects department to put blood and gore on their stuff, ruining it. But also, when you're watching the battles, it really does feel like someone videotaped a reenactment. When you're doing reenactments and you have your musket and you're aiming it at someone, if you're within a specific range, you have to elevate it above their heads, because firing those things can still actually hurt someone. Even if there is no actual bullet in the rifle, the gunpowder or the wadded cartridge can actually really, really hurt someone at close range. So certain shots of the movie, you see the reenactors like over the shoulder, clearly aiming way too high. That doesn't look realistic. Or there is a scene at Pickett's Charge where the high water mark of the Confederacy, Lewis Armistead's troops, make it over the stone wall, and there's a melee hand-to-hand fight where the Union troops are like, all right, let's go get some, and they run in with their bayonets, and then they lift them, and then they're like awkwardly throwing lame punches that clearly look fake. That just looked really sloppy in my opinion. Another thing, the infamous little round top bayonet charge. That's like one of the most iconic moments in the American Civil War, where Joshua Chamberlain had his men fix bayonets, and to secure the left side of the hill, he ordered a bayonet charge. But that looked so sloppy. That looked so sloppy in the movie because you have people either holding their rifles over their shoulders so their bayonets are up while they're charging down the hill while they are in the front, or you have people holding their rifles upwards as opposed to pointing it towards the enemy, and they're basically tiptoeing down the hill. Listen, I get it. They're reenactors and they're probably like, I don't want to accidentally trip and skewer the person in front of me because I have a bayonet on my rifle. Or they're like, I don't want to run into the Confederate reenactor and accidentally poke them or something like that. So I get it, but for a movie it just looks really sloppy. And when they're running down the hill, they're not running, they're tiptoeing down the hill. It doesn't look like a real bayonet charge. It looks sloppy. And in terms of the combat, a lot of the music was overplayed during the battles. The opening music was great, but a lot of the other music just seemed really cheesy, unnecessary, and played way too much to the point where it takes away, detracts from the combat experience of the movie. I don't feel any sort of excitement. And then when you're playing this cheesy, heroic music as Chamberlain's charging down the hill, I don't like that at all, actually. So to recap, the battle scenes don't feel realistic. They don't feel realistic because it looks like people are just doing a reenactment. And I don't think Ronald Maxwell used any sort of filmmaking technique to craft the battle with any sort of cinematic experience. It just looks like someone videotaped a reenactment. I don't get any cool close-ups or zooming shots or tracking shots. It's basically just like stale shots, single shots, like people in frame doing stuff. Stale, looked boring. It doesn't portray the combat in a gritty, realistic way because there's no blood, there's no gore.
The pistol. The prisoner, sir.
After Pickett's charge, you see Longstreet looking into the field of the men being cut down by the Union troops, by Hancock's boys, but they all look relatively fine. That field should be blood-soaked. There should be arms and limbs everywhere. There should be people with their heads blown off, bodies everywhere. It should be a disgusting mess, and we don't see that. It looks like a stale, sanitized version of a reenactment. I don't think that's excusable. Another thing I'm really hypercritical of this movie is I didn't care for some of the unnecessary extra behind the battle, after battle conversations. Like there was literally a conversation where they were talking about the theory of evolution that didn't have to be in the movie. I find this to be interesting because it's a true fact, but Louis Armistead was basically crying in one scene over the fact that he laments he's gonna have to fight against Winfield Hancock. Louis Armistead was a Confederate general. Winfield Hancock was a Northern general. They were very, very good friends, very, very close friends before and during the Civil War.
There isn't an officer on either side who hasn't known someone wearing the other uniform, I know that. Louis Armistead commands one of Pickett's brigades, and he's out there for sure.
And their troops were gonna have to fight each other, and he was really sad about that. That scene where he's crying about it was milked too much. Or then when he was like praising Hancock's wife a little too much, I was like, are you trying to like bang his wife or something? That just seems really inappropriate. I do think the movie was unnecessarily long, with a lot of cheesy performances and cheesy, stale dialogue from supporting characters. I mean, it's too long. The movie is way too long. If a good movie is 3 hours long, that's forgivable. If a bad movie is 4.5 hours long...
Who could have dreamed it could go on for so long?
When the only scenes that are interesting are the strategy when General Lee is like, in the center, they will break. Fine, but there's not enough of that to sustain me throughout, and the battles I've already established were not that good. It's just way too long. I respect that people love this movie. I'm never gonna try to detract from someone liking it. I'm never gonna say you shouldn't like this movie. I personally would say there are scenes that I love and that I would watch as individual scenes.
I somehow thought this day would never come. What would you do, Chamberlain? What do the books tell you to do?
But to watch this as a movie completely from start to finish, I might need another 6 years to do that because I really couldn't. And I think there are other better Civil War films. The history of the movie, it's very good, very historically accurate. I think another criticism I want to say is George Meade, the general who is in charge of the Union Army, the Army of the Potomac, like the commander of the Army of the Potomac, the guy who defeated Robert E. Lee. He was a cameo in this movie. He wasn't a character, he was a cameo. He only had one scene where he showed up and we never see him again.
General Meade, sir.
Hancock, it's so damn dark out there, I can't see a thing.
And I forgot to criticize this earlier, but I don't like how the battle is only seen in little snippets. The movie picks certain aspects of the battle to focus on, and then other things are left out. So Culp's Hill in the battle is almost completely ignored. It's all but ignored in this movie. I don't think there's a single scene that features any sort of fighting for Culp's Hill. There's only one section of Little Round Top that is focused on. That's Joshua Chamberlain on the 20th Maine.
That's good. 60 rounds, I think.
Yes, that's adequate. Any questions?
And Colonel Strong Vincent is seen in the movie, but we don't see anything else. We don't see Gouverneur Warren. We don't see Patty O'Rourke, his New Yorkers, and their bayonet charge on Little Round Top. Well, there was a scene where Hancock and Chamberlain were talking, and though it was a great scene, because I really, really love the music and the sentiments of, you know, there's not an officer who doesn't know someone wearing a different uniform on the other side. That was a great scene, but he acts like Chamberlain was the only one who did a bayonet charge. What about the 1st Minnesota on the 2nd day? He ordered that bayonet charge. He completely ignored that. I mean, there is some B-roll footage battles of other engagements, but for the most part, the Devil's Den, it's mentioned. Maybe in one of those B-roll scenes we get to see it. Wheatfield, Peach Orchard, maybe in one of those B-roll footage there's like a little snippet of it. We don't see it. What we see is the first day with Buford and his cavalry duking it out with the rebels, and then we see Reynolds getting shot. And then the 2nd day is pretty much all Chamberlain's defense of Little Round Top, which was great. That was a really awesome moment in human history, but there are other parts of the battle. And then the 3rd day was all Pickett's charge. I don't like how it ignored aspects of the battle. So if you don't know anything about Gettysburg in real life, you'll come to the understanding of the overview of how it started, how it ended, and how it was a clear Union victory. But there are other things in the battle that I would have liked to have seen in the movie that I didn't. I mean, to be fair, I also really did love the scene with Jeb Stuart and Robert E. Lee. It's like one of the rare times where Robert E. Lee was mad and reprimanded one of his subordinates, but he handled it in such a way that was like graceful and respectful, and that even though he was mad at him, he was like, you are still invaluable to this army. Don't be discouraged. It won't happen again.
We need you. We need every man. God knows.
That was really cool. So that was a good scene as well. Pretty much every scene with Longstreet and Robert E. Lee was fantastic. The scene with Hancock. I actually liked the guy who played Hancock. I thought Hancock was handled very well. I know I'm kind of jumping around back and forth for that. I do apologize. But that's my overall opinion on Gettysburg. I don't think it's a great movie. I don't think it's one of the best Civil War films. I ultimately don't like it. There are scenes that I love, individual scenes that I love, and there is a lot of historical accuracy to the movie, and it can cultivate people's interest in the Civil War, which is something that I appreciate. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I prefer not to watch it. I'm probably not going to watch it in full again for another 6 years. That's my updated opinion on Gettysburg, because people's minds, they do change. If you asked me my opinion on the movie 5 years ago, I would have told you I hated it. I would have told you it was a terrible movie. My opinion on it has changed because I know things about it now that are different. Like I said, first time I watched it, I didn't know it was a made-for-TV movie that got a theatrical release. Now that I know that, I'm not as critical and harsh on it, but there are still a lot of things that this movie leaves left to be desired. Well, guys, that's my opinion on the movie Gettysburg. That's my updated, revised review of the film. I didn't get to everything. If I did, this video would probably be like 3 hours long. It'd probably be longer than the movie if I was to get to everything I wanted to say, but that was long story really short. Even if this video is a bit long, that is as much as I condensed as much of it as I really could. The Battle of Gettysburg, it's one of the most important battles in human history. It's one of the most iconic battles in human history. Well, actually, to be fair, I mean, Gettysburg and Vicksburg at the same time were super crucial to American history. Gettysburg and Vicksburg was the turning point. But Gettysburg was still a really important battle that I hold near and dear, that I find to be really fascinating, that my ancestor fought in. The 31st Georgia, Company K. I think that's still pretty cool. Anyway, long story short, I prefer not to watch the movie. It's not for me. The Union forever. That's all I have to say. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. You know, if you are some history buffs out there who feel betrayed, or Civil War reenactors who are mad at me, I'm not going to deny where I'm coming from. If that makes you upset, it is what it is. I'm not going to apologize for my opinions. That's just what we do. There's a reason why I'm unpopular opinion. Anyway, guys, that's all I have for you. Remember to like this video, subscribe, follow me on Instagram. That will be linked in the description below, and I'll see you on the next Unpopular Opinion.